Are you not climbing at the level you'd like to perform at, and you feel like fear or frustration or just a lack of focus are keeping you from doing that? Well, as a mindset coach for climbers, I can help you. I work with climbers of all levels from all over the world, and we talk about what is holding them back, and we make a plan for how to get them past those barriers. Whether it's fear of falling, fear of failure, just getting frustrated with yourself, comparing yourself with others, I can help you. You can go to trainingbeta.com/mindset to see my options, and I've recently lowered my prices to make mindset coaching more available to more people. Again, that's trainingbeta.com/mindset, and I'd love to work with you. This is the Training Beta podcast, and I'm your host, Neely Quinn. Thanks for joining me for another episode all about rock climbing. We talk about all things rock climbing here, including physical training and mental training. And today we're going to be focusing on the mental side of things. So I have Kat Lumby on the show. She is a sport and exercise psychologist in training out of Wales in the UK, and she runs Labyrinth Climbing, which is found at labyrinthclimbing.co.uk. She's a climbing coach and she's a sports psychologist, and she works with climbers and surfers and all kinds of athletes. And she uses this specific kind of therapy, which I had never heard of. It's called rational emotion behavioral therapy. So she's going to tell you all about it, and it's very concrete. I love structured therapy like this. So she's going to tell you how she uses it with her clients. And then she's going to do a little therapy session on me about my fear of falling. And this therapy seems to be very useful with any fear, but basically just like anything that's holding you back. So again, this is Kat Lumby, and I hope you enjoy this, and I'll talk to you on the other side. All right, welcome to the show, Kat. Thanks very much for talking with me today.
Okay, hi. Good evening, good day.
Yeah, right. It's evening in the UK and noon in Colorado. And so yeah, let's start there. Like who are you? Where do you live? What do you do? Tell us all about yourself.
So my name is Kat. I live in Wales, which is in the UK, and I am lots of things, as we all are. So I'm a climber, I guess, primarily. And I've been climbing for a long time, maybe 10 years, maybe more. I'm also a climbing coach, but I'm also a sports psychologist, and I work a lot with climbers, like mainly with climbers, but I also work with other sports too. I've worked with surfers, and I'd say I probably work more on adventure sports and looking a lot at things like fear. But I don't want to, I don't want to jump ahead.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk all about that. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is to be a sports psychologist in the UK? Like what's the training like? What's that like?
Yes, of course. It's a really good thing to mention because I am a sports psychologist in training, which in the UK, and I think it's specific to the UK, it's different in other countries. We have a system where you have your formal educational qualification. So I've done all of my degrees. I have 3 degrees in psychology and a master's in sports psychology and also in social psychology. And then after you've done your formal education, you then move on to stage 2, which is your applied practice. So then you're working with athletes, both elite athletes and recreational athletes, and also in performance areas as well. It doesn't have to be sports, but see, for a lot of us it is. And you have to do that through a body. So it's either the BPS in the UK, which is the British Psychological Society, or CASES, which is the Chartered Association of Sport and Exercise Science. And you work through that body for 3 years, going through different assessments and applied practice until you can then be accredited as an HCPC psychology practitioner, which means you're a health practitioner and you're held to a very strict ethical guidelines and rules, and you are able to then practice as a fully fledged sports psychologist.
Wow, that was a lot of acronyms. Really good job with that. So then where exactly are you in the process? I mean, I understand you've got your 3 degrees and all that, but
So I've been practicing for about a year, and then studying before that for in total, I don't know, like 8 years,
yeah.
probably something like that. But yeah. So I'm in the applied practice stage at
And
the
then
moment.
what do you wanna do with all of this going forward? Like, in your career?
Well, that's a good question. So I mean, I want to continue doing what I'm doing. So I want to continue with applied practice. I personally really enjoy working with athletes one to one. I I just find that to be a field that I enjoy doing. They do work with groups and squads and on a group level too. I just personally really enjoy working with people on a one to one basis. Um, I'd quite like to. I said I focus very much on climbing, partly also because I have been a climbing coach for 6 years as well. So I naturally gravitate towards climbing, but I would very much like to expand out to other sports. So I work actually with a fantastic sports psychologist called Dr. Lindsay Woodford with England Surfing. And we're doing some work with our national England adaptive squad. And that's fantastic. And I love working with surfers. Quite like to do some work with mountain bikers. And I'm also looking at doing some work in rugby and just really expanding out
Nice.
to other
That sounds
sports.
fun. Yeah. And when you say working one to one is what you really like, do you mean are you seeing people face to face in an office setting? Are you doing Zoom calls? Are you working with people like actually on the wall and at their sport site?
So I do both. So actually, the day before yesterday, we went to the Wave in Bristol, which is like an artificial surfing
Cool.
area. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what you call it, but it's a wave machine. But I think the water itself. I'm going off on a tangent, but anyway, I went there with Surfing England to see them in person and observe them surfing, and then we had a great workshop and we were talking to the athletes as well. And that's really important to actually work with athletes in their training environment and in the environment where they are doing their sport and they're really comfortable and owning their sport and you're able to see them in their natural environment, I guess. And then, as I said, because I also have worked as a climbing coach, I do tend to do sessions with climbers on the wall because I'm qualified to do so, and it's okay for me to have that double like dual hat. And I really enjoy doing sessions outside. I feel like it makes quite a big difference to actually be with someone, especially when we're talking about fear, to be with someone in the environment where they're actually struggling with the thing that they're talking to you about. It
Yeah.
makes quite a big difference. So I do like to go out into the crag and into the climbing walls with the
That's
clients whenever
cool.
I
That's
can.
really cool. Great. Well, thank you for giving that overview of yourself. And the reason that we are talking today is that you actually have this really specific way of working with fear, which I don't know if that's like the only way that you work with fear, but it's definitely something we want to talk about today. So, would you like to introduce that topic?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So the thing that we wanted to talk about is this specific framework called rational emotion behavior therapy. And it's not the only framework that I use, but it's the one that I've recently done research in. And I really like it as a framework. I find it very interesting, and I think there's a lot there. There's a lot of use in it. But I do also I'll use things like mindfulness and also acceptance-based therapies, and I draw on a lot of different things. But yeah, we're here to talk about REBT, so rational emotion behavior
Rational
therapy.
emotion behavioral therapy. And what is the overview
Yes,
of that,
another
of
acronym.
REBT?
So REBT is I don't want to give lots more acronyms, but it's a type of CBT, so it's a type of cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's been around for quite a long time actually. So it sort of sounds. I don't actually like the title. I don't like what it's called, but I'll come back to that. But it's been around since about the 50s when it was introduced as one of the first CBTs, one of the first cognitive behavioral therapies and it was used a lot within clinical psychology. So that's kind of like where it came from, by a guy called Dr. Ellis. So he kind of pioneered it, and he was the person that really drove it as a framework. And then in the last probably 10, 20 years, it's really grown within sports psychology. So it's been, especially not just in the UK, but there are particularly researchers in the UK who have used it a lot and used it across lots of different sports, individual sports, team sports, in a few different areas. And they've really progressed it in terms of making it a prominent framework within the realm of sports
Okay.
psychology
And
specifically.
what is it like? What do you do in this type of therapy?
So REBT is uh where do we begin? So it's a therapy that's based on beliefs. Beliefs is the most important part of REBT. And that's the area that we target, and we call it specific REBT when we look quite sharply on the beliefs. But before we start doing that and looking at that, there's a model within REBT of how we believe people react to adversity, and how they see adversity, and how they cope with it, and how that leads to certain things. And it's called the ABC model, or we call it ABC thinking. So before we talk about how we do REBT, the first step is like, well, how does REBT say that we think? Like, what is the problem that REBT is trying to solve, basically? So I think we talked about maybe having an example to make it. I think REBT is easier understood when you can see it being done, rather than the sort of theory behind it. So I'll go through from like a more applied perspective. So we talk about A to C thinking, and A is your adversity, and C is the consequence of being faced with that adversity. A good way to think of an adversity is it's something that's stopping you from getting to your goal. So in REBT, we focus a lot on your goals and trying to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. So that tends to be the starting place for a lot of the discussions, is like, well, what do you want? What is it you're trying to do? And then what is it that's stopping you from getting the thing that you want? And that's what the adversity is.
Got it. Okay. Can you give me a couple examples of what that would look like for climbers?
So the most common example, and the example that we talked about in my research, is if your goal, and it's a very common goal amongst climbers, is to get to the top of a route. Like what you want to do, what you want to achieve in your session, in your attempt, is to get to the top. Then getting to a part of the climb, and let's say you're lead climbing, where you have a difficult or uncertain move above the bolt, that may prevent you from reaching your goal. So that's your adversity. A difficult, uncertain move in a maybe slightly risky situation, being above the bolt in lead climbing.
Got it. So the adversity is and yeah, I'm
So
just kind of
that's
reading
your
through your notes too. The adversity is reaching the crux of the climb and there's uncertainty. And then the consequence is the emotion, like feeling fear and whatever that brings.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think often when we talk about these things, like when I ask people what's going on, this all comes out in one. So you're like, well, what's the problem? What are you facing? And it's, oh, I'm getting really scared. I'm really scared of falling. I'm scared of falling on a lead climb. I get to difficult moves above the bowl and I just get
Mm,
terrified and I back off. And that's quite a common thing that people talk about. I know I've experienced it. But with REBT, we're really trying to pull it apart and kind of say, well, what's the difficulty? What's the goal? And I think in this scenario, the goal is slightly simpler, because we're kind of saying it's to get through the crux. There's maybe to get to the top, but let's say to get through the crux. So the adversity is that something is making it difficult for you to do that. It's difficult for you to execute the move, or you don't know whether you can execute the move. That is the adversity on its own. And then it leads to those feelings of being afraid, being frustrated, being angry, maybe feeling shame. There's all kinds of consequences that can happen when we're faced with that adversity.
got it. And you had mentioned ABC thinking. So the A is adversity, the C is a consequence. Tell me about the B.
So the idea is that we think, and I know I've kind of set up in this way, we think that we hit an adversity and that leads to a consequence. So we climb above the bolt, therefore I get scared. So REBT is saying that's not true. That's what we think is happening. But in reality, it's our beliefs that disturb us, not the events that we face. So it's not being above the bolt that's leading us to be afraid. It's the beliefs that we hold about being above the bolt that leads us to
And what
being
kinds
afraid.
of examples of those beliefs can you give us?
So I think the most obvious example is you believe that you're going to hurt yourself. Like you believe that if you execute this move above the bolt and don't do it, you're going to fall and break your ankles. That could be a belief that you have about something that may or may not happen. And that belief that you're going to hurt yourself then leads to the consequence of being
Okay.
afraid.
Yeah, and you wrote down a couple other beliefs here, which I think are really important. Like, I can't fall here. If I fall, it will be awful. Or I should be able to do this, which I encounter a lot with my clients. And then that thought leads to the shame or anger, disappointment, and like the belief that I must not take, like it's not even an option. And so you feel stuck, and then that can cause fear and all kinds of things. So it is interesting because, like you said, people say all of these things at once, but we don't actually sit and pick apart these very tangible parts of the whole thing, like you're doing right now. So, what is the importance of parsing it out like this?
So the reason why we pull it apart like this, and I think pulling these things apart and being really analytical, for one thing, gives us distance from what it is that's troubling us. So it's easier for us to work on how we can then approach that and how we can start to manage that. When you're right in it, when you're feeling it and you're experiencing it, and you're wrapped up in all these feelings of shame, it's really hard to see a way through. So I think being able to take a step back and look at, well, what is the process? What are the steps that are leading us here? Is just useful in itself. But the reason why in RIBT we do this is because we really zero in on the belief. So if the you're having these beliefs that are leading to these consequences, and we don't want to have those consequences, we want to be able to achieve our goal, and the consequences are preventing us from achieving that goal, then we need to change our beliefs. And that's what RIBT is then pushing us towards
Okay.
doing.
Yeah. How do you do that? What do you do with clients when you're at that part?
So the way that we do it, and again, there's more. I'm trying not to overload with with information because there's lots of steps. But within the RIBT, so RIBT is a very binary model. So the way that it talks about it is very much there's this side and there's this side. So we talk about having irrational beliefs and rational beliefs. And the idea is that we all hold rational and irrational beliefs as humans. And I think one of the ways in which RIBT has been kind of misunderstood by, I don't know by who, by certain people in the community, by sports psychologists, by other psychologists, by people. It's not about telling someone, "Oh, you're irrational. You're not thinking rationally. You need to be more rational." That's not what REBT is. But it does say that within everybody, we have these two different sets of beliefs. And if we have more rational beliefs and those rational beliefs are strengthened, then it will lead to more healthy consequences. And then we talk about healthy consequences and unhealthy consequences. And this is again a binary way. And we all live with both. No one is perfect. No one lives this life where we just have lots of rational beliefs and lots of fantastic, happy consequences all the time. We all deal with both, but it's talking about, well, what is preventing you from reaching the things that you really want, the goals that are important to you, and then how can we make it so that you can then get there, not necessarily dealing with everything all
Hmm.
at once. Does that
Yeah.
make
And
sense?
can you give me some examples of these irrational versus rational beliefs?
So I will. But before I do that, I'll just say when I talk about because I don't really like, it sounds like a funny thing for me to say. I don't really like the term rational or irrational because I think it's quite loaded. And potentially this is because it's come from a framework that is quite, it originates from the 50s. So how we saw rationality and irrationality was slightly different. And I think we've sort of changed as society, but I won't go off
Okay.
and talk about that too much. But so when we talk about irrational beliefs, really what we're talking about is beliefs that are unhelpful. And when I talk to my clients, I talk about what beliefs are helpful and what beliefs are unhelpful. And the rational, unhelpful beliefs tend to be rigid. They tend to be absolute. They're extreme. They're black and white in their rules. There's no room. There's no flexibility. They're just this or this. Whereas rational, helpful beliefs tend to be much more balanced, much more flexible, much more relative, and they move us towards our goal or help us to understand our goal better or understand what we need to do to reach our goal.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand. Are you saying there's kind of like a stigma with the word irrational?
I
Yeah.
think so, yeah. And I think it becomes a bit of a like, it's bad to be emotional. And it's this thing of like, oh, I'm being overly emotional. I'm not being rational. But I believe our emotions can be really strong, positive things in our life. It shouldn't be about trying to be a robot and trying to remove everything that we
Mhm.
feel. And sometimes I think the discussion around being rational it can go a bit too much
Yeah,
in that
that makes
direction.
sense. So, seeing as how we have this disclaimer about irrational versus rational and unhelpful versus helpful, what does that look like in real life in climbing?
What does rational and irrational
Yeah.
beliefs look like in climbing? So before sorry, before I move on to that, within REBT, there are different types of irrational and rational beliefs. So we've got rational and irrational, and then there's also different categories of what those are within the theory. And that helps us a lot to start to understand how they're affecting us and where they're driving us towards. So, and these do apply to climbing, but I think it's useful to
Mhm.
understand what they are before we say, well, how do they apply to climbing? Although all my examples are climbing related. So within irrational, we'll talk about rational beliefs because that's what we're most interested in. So the primary one we talk about is demands. So an irrational belief, a demand is, for example, I should be able to climb this grade. Well, as the mirror image of that, as a rational belief, is a preference. So it's I would like to climb this grade.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think this came up a lot in the research. I think it was probably the strongest thing that came out in the research with the climbers that I spoke to is this, and I think a lot of people will recognize this, is this word should. It's that I should be able to climb this. I should be able to climb this grade. I should be able to flash this. I should be able to do this. And it really strongly linked to these expectations that climbers held about themselves, about when they should be able, not just able to climb something, but able to climb something easily and able to climb it well. And these terms should and must came up a lot.
And backtracking just a little bit, when you say the research that you did, what did that look like? What were you surveying people? What were you doing?
Yes, so the research that I did, so I took 5 sport climbers in the UK and I held 3 workshops based on REBT where we went through this model. So we went through the ABC model and we went through beliefs and we went through disputation, which I'll come on to. And I did that over 3 weeks. And we had homework tasks each week. And then at the end of it, I interviewed 3 of the climbers and analysed that information effectively and then pulled out the methodology we use is called IPA, another acronym, but we pulled out themes and it's very heavily, the type of research is very close to what people say. So rather than trying to pull out, this had this effect, this like universal effect. It's more about how did these individual people experience this, and what did they say about it, and how did it affect them as individuals, rather than necessarily being able to say, okay, this is an effective technique, therefore it's gonna have the same effect on this group of climbers as well. It's very specific
Okay.
to these individuals.
And do you want to talk about any of those findings real quick? And we can come back to it too. I don't want to get in the way of what we were just talking about, but I am curious.
Um, well, it links across. So I think I'll finish. I'll probably keep darting back and
Yeah,
forth
great.
between them because the beliefs that we talked about are the beliefs that REBT discusses, because that's what the purpose of the research was. So within this, we talked about demands and preferences as like it's the primary irrational belief that we focus on. But then underneath that, you also have three other irrational beliefs that link to it. And this did come up in the research as well. So the first one is, we call it low frustration tolerance. And that's where you'll hear people saying, I can't bear not being able to do something, or I can't bear this experience. And then the rational side of that is high frustration tolerance, where it's an acceptance that something is difficult, but that it's bearable. So the example I gave is, it sucks that I can't work this out, but I can tolerate it.
Mm,
And to me, that's important, because it's not about reframing something negative as positive. It's about accepting something is negative, but that the world's not going to end if you experience that. You're still going to exist, and you're still going to be who you are,
yeah.
continuing onwards. So the third one is called, this is a funny term. People always, whenever I say this, people always say, is that made up? But well, like all words are made up. But it's called it's called awfulizing. And I think I thought this would be more prominent in the research, or I thought it would be prominent in a certain way, and it wasn't in the way that I thought. But awfulizing is basically when you make something out to be the worst thing possible. So the example I gave was, other people seeing me fail is just awful. But I think this also links to what I was saying before about, if you have a belief, if you fall above the bolt, that something awful is going to happen, that you're going to die, you're going to have a life altering accident. I feel like awfulizing links in a lot with this concept we talk about in CBT about catastrophizing. It's like believing the absolute worst possible thing is going to happen, rather than something bad, but maybe not absolutely terrible. So the flip side of awfulizing is non-awfulizing. So it's just the other side of it. So yeah, again, it's accepting it's negative. So other people seeing me fail as unpleasant, but there's worse things. It's not awful. It's not the end of the world. Is a negation of that awfulizing belief. Okay, so the fourth one, the fourth irrational belief, is called self-depreciation. And I find this one came out the strongest in the research, where perhaps I didn't think it would do. And this is about, if I can't do this route, I'm not really a climber, and I'm less of a person. And I feel like that's something that my clients, the people that I work with, it's a refrain that I hear quite a lot, is this not being able to do something that they thought they would be able to do. It doesn't just affect their belief that they can do it. It affects how they see themselves, and how they see themselves as a climber, and how they see themselves as a person. In REBT, we call that self-depreciating, because you're seeing yourself as less.
Yeah, it's intense. It is pretty pervasive.
It's amazing how pervasive, because it is intense, isn't it? Like, it's kind of, I don't want to I don't want to say the term irrational, but it's kind of hard to believe. I think people outside of climbing would find it hard to believe that so many of us hold this belief that if we can't climb a rock, we're less of a person. But it's actually really quite widespread in our community that people are affected by it in that way. And I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, and I also find it fascinating that when people say things like I'm not really a climber because I'm not climbing as hard as I should be. When I ask them what would make you a real climber, they have a hard time with coming up with an answer to that question. Like, what is the binary answer? Like, what would make you a real climber? And so that I think can cause a lot of anxiety because there is no like right answer to it. So,
That's a really good question to ask people because it's true. If you have this goal of being this thing, but you can't define what that is, you're never going to be it. So you're always going
exactly.
to feel less. So the other side of self-depreciation is self-acceptance. So that's where you would say, yeah, if I can't do this route, I'll be sad. I'll be disappointed. I'll be gutted because I really wanted to do it. But I'm still going to climb, and it doesn't make me less of
Mhm.
a person.
Easier said than done.
Yes, yes, it is. It is. It's very easy to kind of say, well, these are the irrational beliefs and these are the rational beliefs, but that's not enough. It's not enough just to kind of say like, oh, this is helpful and this is unhelpful. There has to be. So within REBT, it's an important step to separate these things out so that you can see what beliefs are driving your behavior and you can see where it's helping you and where it's not helping you. But the work, the most important part of REBT is what we call disputation, where you challenge your beliefs. So there's lots of different tools and ways that psychologists will work with someone to help them dispute what they believe. But it's really important because I can say to you, oh, don't be silly. You should appreciate yourself. Like you're a person, but you're not going to believe me because that's not the belief that you hold. Or it may be a belief that you hold, but it's not the most prominent one in your mind, and it's not the one that's driving your behavior. So that the belief that is the irrational belief that you're less of a person if you can't do something, we've got to challenge that, and we've got to weaken it, and we've got to help you find a way to no longer believe it or no longer believe it as strongly.
Yeah, how do you do that?
How do you do that? I mean, that is the question, and people do it in different ways. But the way that I approach it with my clients is I tend to be very questioning. So for me, like I said, it's not for me to tell someone they're wrong or to tell somebody what the answer is. I like to ask people questions and help to guide them towards what the answer will be or what the answer will be for them.
And then what? What does that do for them?
So the sort of guide of these questions is to for them to understand how relevant or true that belief is for them. So some of the things that we might be asking them is what's the evidence for it? So like where has it come from? What supports this belief? And also what does the opposite? Like what doesn't support it and what negates it? And you ask people to collect examples. So an example that you might have someone do. Oh, in fact, I remember listening in the podcast that you had with I've forgotten his surname, but Alex. He was an American
Mhm.
sports
Yeah, Bridgewater.
psychologist. So yes, Bridgewater. So he said something that made me think because it's a very similar mechanism, and it's the idea of someone saying to you, "Oh, everybody everyone's going to laugh at me at the crag if I can't do this, and I'll be ostracized as a climber and I won't be accepted in the community." One of the ways that you can dispute that belief is to say, okay, well, ask those people. If these are people that you care about and these are your friends and these are people who you're close to, then ask them what they think and if they are going if they do hold your ability to climb that climb in such a high esteem that that's the most important thing to them. So you're asking them to collect evidence to either, well, hopefully to dispute that
Mhm.
belief.
And do you have your clients do that?
I do, yeah. In certain circumstances, yes, but I'm fairly measured about how they do it and who they ask and whether they. And again, this is for me to work out with them. It wouldn't just be me saying, right, you need to go and do this. It's asking questions like, do you think that this is going to be helpful? Do you think that you can ask those questions? And how are you going to ask those questions? And what do you think the answers are going to be? So it's not just a kind of just go off and do it because you can't know what's going to
Mhm.
come back.
That I just basically had this conversation with a client yesterday, and it's like, okay, they can ask these people, and I have done that in my own journey. I've asked my friends, like, what they think about me and my climbing and what my climbing means to them in regards to me. Um, and there's a portion of you that will believe what they say, but I think with a lot of people, they might hear them say, "I don't care how hard you climb," but they're gonna believe something different, and it's because within themselves, they judge themselves and maybe even others. And so it's hard, like on their climbing ability. And so it's hard for them to believe that somebody else could believe differently than they do about themselves or about others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like half the battle to talk to others, and then the other half is changing your own beliefs.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's a really good point because there's your beliefs about others and what you think other people think. But you're rightly pointing out that if you hold
Yeah.
that belief yourself, you hold the belief that what's important is what you can climb, then the issue isn't actually what other people think, it's what you think, and it's your belief. So that would be you need to challenge that in a different way.
Yeah. So how do we challenge these things? What other questions are you asking people, or what other things are you doing with them?
So one of the ways, and we only touched upon this in the research, but I really like it as a tool. So I'll use that as an example. And this comes from Dr. Martin Turner. It's not my tool, so I can't take credit for it, but I think it's really useful. And it's this idea about putting yourself into context. So if we're talking specifically about those self-depreciating beliefs, so it's that belief that you're less of a person if you can't climb this route. One of the tools that we use is to say you draw a massive eye on a piece of paper, and then you draw little eyes inside of it for everything that's happened, say, well, not everything that's happened, but different things different events that have happened in the last 6 months in your climbing, both positive and negative. So, for example, you have a little eye and you'd say, yeah, I sent my project. Like last week, I sent my project and I felt great. It was fantastic. Okay, great. And then you'll have another eye that would say, a month ago, I backed off a grade, 3 grades lower than my max because I was just really scared and I couldn't do it. And then you might have another eye that says, I I went home and looked after my sister when she wasn't very well because I love her.
Okay. And then what do you do with that?
So it's you talk it through and you talk through each of these instances. And the idea is that you're trying to, again, with all of these things, it's self discovery. So you're not trying to tell someone the answer, you're trying to help them to look at things through a certain perspective. And you're trying to give them the context to understand that they are more than one thing. So they are not failing on that climb. They are not succeeding on that climb. They're a person that includes all of these things. And no matter what happens, no matter what those little lies say, they're still a person and they're still them. It's just that there's different instances in time where you've done this thing or done that thing or done this thing. So it's just a way of giving someone perspective, but you have to talk through it with them. You have to guide them through it. It's not just a case of doing the exercise and
Yeah.
then it's done.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Like helping a person realize that they're more than their climbing, because we can get pretty obsessive. And I think that the most helpful thing for me with that, cuz I thought that too for a long time, is asking somebody asked me, like, what do I like about people around me at the crag? And it wasn't ever how hard they climb. It was like, are they nice? Are they are they friendly? Are they self-deprecating? Are they supportive? Are they taking good care of their children and dogs? Are they kind to their partner? Like all of those things. That's what I look for in a person. It's not their climbing ability. And once people see that like that's what they
Mm.
value in others, I feel like it's much easier for them to see that they also are not just their climbing.
I think that's a really good point. And again, it's giving this perspective. And I think we talk about what you value. And I mentioned at the beginning that I haven't talked about it that much, but when we talk about the adversity, it's always in relation to the goal. And I kind of gave a bit of a simple goal of, okay, it's to get to the top. But when you start looking at REBT, and this is what we found with the research, because we spent, I think most of the first workshop was just looking at goals and actually trying to get people to understand, well, what do you actually care about? Like, why did you start climbing? What was it that made you go climbing instead of going surfing or instead of going for a walk? Like you chose to climb and you choose to spend your time and your effort climbing. So why? And when you got people to really drill into their goals and in a much wider term, not in terms of I want to climb 7A or I want to get to the top, people started to think more about what they really cared about and why they were going climbing. And their goals started to shift. And that started to release some of that pressure and expectation because they realized that what they valued about climbing was so taking an example from the research, one of the participants, they just wanted to be part of a community. They wanted to be out with people and they wanted to push themselves and have that experience. But it didn't really have anything to do with climbing a particular grade or getting to the top of a climb. And when they started to think about it more in terms of what they cared about, it started to release some of those
Yeah.
expectations.
I have a question for you because something that comes up a lot with pretty much all of my clients with mindset coaching is um, if I don't climb a certain grade, if I don't keep up with my friends and community, they're going to abandon me. And then I ask them, like, why would they abandon you? Would it be because they want to climb at certain areas where you don't have anything to climb on? Is it what is it? And a lot of times they don't really have a good answer for that. But so like I'm sure that you come across that too. What do you do? What do you ask them? How do you help them in that situation?
So I've had similar, I haven't had exactly that, but I have had similar situations to that or situations described to me. But I think really what jumps out to me, if someone was to say that to me, like their belief is that their friends are going to abandon them, is is to dig into where that belief comes from. So it's not just about like why why would they do that? It's why would you think that? And there's most likely going to be some background as to where that belief comes from. And it's likely it comes from outside of climbing as well. And I think very often people, in a way, it can be positive, the way we compartmentalize and kind of just focus on climbing. But the truth is, who we are, it tends to come into everything that we do. So I think if you have a belief about being abandoned, it's most likely coming from somewhere, and there may be a broader context that's outside of just having your climbing friends move on to
Mhm.
other grades.
Yeah. Can you give well, we don't have to jump into that, but yeah, I mean, I can see how this can become a very big conversation and like people will have to do a lot of soul searching to get to why do I feel like I should climb this grade and why am I miserable climbing? Like it's not just there's not just this one little trick that you can use to make yourself love climbing again. Like you really have to get into the weeds sometimes.
Yes. And that's a really good point. I think often when you're working with people, and it takes a really long time, like I kind of, we introduce this model and say, oh, you just got to look at your ABCs and you've got to dispute your beliefs, but it's not easy. It's easy to say it. It's quite hard to do it. And often when you start talking to people about what they believe, they're just telling you their thoughts. So it's just like, I thought this, like the thought popped into my head. That's what I believe. But really, we're saying there are beliefs underlying that go much deeper. And those are the things that are driving your behaviors. And those are the things that we're trying to pull out. And it's not that easy. It's not as easy as just like, well, I climbed above the bolt and I thought, oh God, what if I fail? That's your thought. There's a belief underneath that about what you believe about what failure means, or any belief that might be driving that. And it's not necessarily going to be the first thought on your mind. So this idea of like digging deep is really very relevant for REBT. And I think one of the things that came out of the research is that it's not necessarily right for everyone. Because if you're not prepared to do that, if you're not really prepared to think about why you believe what you believe and where that may have come from, then it's not going to be very effective for you. You have to dig quite deep in order to actually have some kind of change.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering if for my next question, we should just, because we had talked before about you doing some, like, kind of an example on me, which I'm totally willing to do. Um, so maybe we should just do that. Do you still want to do that?
Yeah, yeah, let's
Yeah.
do that. That sounds great.
Yeah, I'm
If you're
happy
happy
to,
to.
because I think that we can talk in theories and examples, but it might just be easier for people to see it.
So the best way is to start. So IBT is problem focused. So the best way to start is with the adversity. So like what's the problem?
And this would be like on a certain climb in general. What do you think?
So it's up to you, but the more specific it is, the easier it is for us to use it as an example. If it's quite general, we'll probably end up pulling apart lots of different beliefs, and that would take a very
Okay.
long time.
Okay.
So it's probably the smaller and more specific it is, the quicker it will be. But I would also say, because we're doing it as an example, I'll probably be a lot more directive than I would normally be. I'd normally be quite open and be asking
Okay.
you what you think. But I would also spend probably an hour with someone just talking about
Right.
their ABC. So let's be quite specific, and I will probably be a lot more directive than I would
Okay, well
normally be.
then let's go back to the Red River Gorge in November when I was working on this climb, and I was like wimpy sticking my way up it for the first few times on it because it was pretty run out, and that's just the way I like to do things. But then when I got to the point of wanting to do all the clips myself, and it just got really scary. And sometimes I yeah, I just got really scared and shaky, and it was definitely prohibitive. And I also needed to go above one of the bolts in order to clip, and I didn't do that. Which I know if I was on point on it, it would have been totally it would have, like, blown me out, and I wouldn't have been able to send. So, yeah, just being scared above bolts.
Okay. So just to be really specific, and also being British, we just have slightly different terminology. So I'm just going to be really understand what you mean. So did you say
Oh,
wimpy
yeah,
sticking?
sorry. I have this tiny little, stick clip that it just clips to my harness, and so I was clipping up each on the scary bolts.
So is that like
Yeah,
a
it's
clip
a
stick? So you're
yeah,
leading up and
yeah.
then
It's just a smaller stick clip that's easier to carry around.
yeah. So do you go in
Yeah, you go in direct and then you
um
pull up rope. Yeah. Mhm.
direct to the bolt and then pull up the slack and
Yeah.
clip it in above
Mhm.
you? Is
Yeah.
that what you mean? Perfect. So you were doing
Mhm.
that.
And then I got up the bravery to, you know, go to the next bolt on my own, and I would like grab the draw, or I wouldn't actually go to the hold that I really needed to in order to clip it properly. I would like do some sketchy stuff sometimes.
Okay. So you're above the bolts and you're trying to clip the rope
Yeah.
into the next
Mhm.
bolt.
And it was frustrating, because I was like, I just want to be brave. I just want this to not be a big deal. I'm gonna fall into air. it's just going to be a big fall. And I didn't like that idea.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So then we would say, yeah, so the adversity is the being above the bolt and needing to clip the next
Yes.
bolt. I guess the questions I would be asking is, did you know what your clipping position was
Yeah,
going to
in
be?
theory. Yeah.
Yes, in theory. So you knew, but you wouldn't get into that position, or once
Yeah.
you were in it,
No, I
it didn't
wouldn't
feel
even get
right.
into it because it was so scary because I had to go above the bolt to get into that position. And I was like, there is no way I can make myself do this because it was so far away from my last bolt.
And was it just the distance from the bolt? Was the climbing itself
Oh yeah,
difficult
this
for
is
you? Like when
the
you were, say,
crux.
if you,
And so it's very difficult, and it was the distance and the fact that I was doing these super difficult moves as high above my bolts as I could be.
yeah, okay, perfect. So then that's yeah, so that's the adversity. It's both the difficulty, the distance above the bolt, and the well, was there
Yeah,
uncertainty?
definitely uncertainty of whether or not I would do the moves. There was a little bit of uncertainty because I hadn't practiced the clip very much, so I didn't know exactly how it was gonna feel.
Okay, perfect. And then what was the consequence? So when we talk about consequence, what did you feel and what did you do?
The consequence was that I stick clipped up more times than I wanted to, so I was a little bit ashamed of myself. I grabbed the draw, and so that was not, like, the best learning experience that I wanted to have. I really wanted to have the sensation and experience of clipping so I knew what it would be like, so I could practice it, and so I was disappointed and frustrated with myself, and slightly ashamed that I wasn't just a braver, better climber. And I was
Hmm.
scared. I was, like, really scared.
Yeah. And what did you, so just in terms of what you did you, it's just so I understand, and this is what we tend to do with someone is to really drill into it. So did you go above the draw or go above the clip and sort of start to try and then climb back down, or did you
No, I
not
didn't do
do that?
that. I I would, like, get to a place where I could grab the next draw and just grab the next draw.
So the behavior was great that seems to be important is that you
Yeah,
grab
or
the
that I
draw.
would clip off of a terrible hold, in desperate fashion that because I needed to go 2 more moves up, and I couldn't make myself.
Okay. So desperate clipping off a
Yep.
bad hold.
Mhm. Or grabbing the draw.
Okay. And grabbing the draw. And then obviously you mentioned a few different emotions
Mhm.
that you felt as well. So so frustration tends to be the most common one because frustration is just not being able to achieve the thing that you wanted to achieve. So it's the most common thing that we experience when we're talking about reaching an adversity. It's almost like within the definition of it. If you if you were prevented from doing what you wanted to do, you would be frustrated. But then you also talked about being disappointed, being ashamed, and also
Mhm.
being
Yeah.
scared. Okay, perfect. So when you were talking about these things, so again, when we've already talked about this, but so REBT would say, okay, so the adversity was grabbing the draw and sorry, not grabbing the draw. The adversity was being above the bolt and not being able to get to the next bolt to clip or finding it difficult to do so in the distance between them. And then the consequence of hitting that adversity was being scared, being ashamed, being disappointed, and then the behaviors were grabbing the draw and also clipping
Mhm.
off a bad hold. But even as you were talking about these things, you mentioned some things that potentially could be beliefs, or certainly indicated there were some underlying beliefs that most likely led to these
Mhm.
consequences. Do you know what those beliefs are?
Um, I mean, there's definitely still the belief that I should be able to do certain things, or that people watching will judge me, or that falling is dangerous. Like that's the biggest one really, is like falling is inherently dangerous and I should avoid it at all costs.
Okay. Okay. There were another couple of things that you said that made me think there were other beliefs going on as well. I think it's connected to this thing about that you should be able to do
Mhm.
certain things. Because you mentioned, what's it? I wrote it down. My notes are absolutely all
It's
over
okay.
the place. So I think it's that you felt you should be able to get to the next clip.
Yeah, that I should be able to do it in you know, without being desperate.
And you also said that you stick clipped more than you
Yeah, it's
wanted
basically
to.
that I should be braver than I am.
Yes, I think that was it, that you should be braver than you are. So I would say that the two beliefs that we would want to look at is that you should be braver than you are, and that falling is
Yeah,
inherently
that
dangerous.
boils down a lot of my climbing experience.
Okay, good. So then within REBT, we would we would break down those two beliefs. So the first task that we would do is sorting whether we believe those are rational beliefs or irrational
Okay.
beliefs.
Yeah, I mean,
So
obviously
what do
they're
you think?
irrational, unhelpful. Yeah.
So why? Why are they unhelpful?
Um,
Why? So let's take them one by one. So the falling is inherently dangerous. Why is that
well,
irrational?
because especially in this case, I had really good belayers. It's so overhung that as soon as you fall directly into pillowy air, even if they had short roped me, it wouldn't have mattered. Or given me a hard catch. And it's just not dangerous. Like I'm not gonna fall upside down. I'm really careful with the rope. I'm not gonna have it behind my leg. Like nothing is gonna happen
How do you know nothing is going to happen?
because nothing has ever happened before, knock on wood. And I don't know. That's the thing. I something could happen, but the evidence has shown that it's not going to. Like the odds are in my favor. Like yeah, a bolt could pull out. My
Okay.
belayer could have a seizure and hold down the gree or whatever.
So one of the things that we would, yeah, it's difficult because I feel like we would have quite a long conversation about this. But one of the tools that we used in the research that I might use in this instance is, so this links to orphalizing, this thing about falling being inherently dangerous, because it's an absolute belief rather than, and you clearly hold other helpful rational beliefs about it being relative and about it being a degree of risk. So those rational thoughts are there, or those rational beliefs are there. We want to bring them out. But the belief that it's inherently dangerous is a absolute belief. So we'd say it's unhelpful. And it's an awfulizing belief because it's the worst thing. It's inherently dangerous is a similar thing to saying it's awful because it's the worst, it's the extreme. So one of the tools that we used, we called it, or I called it, the badness matrix. So often in sports psychology, they would have a scale of 100% awful, like it's the worst possible thing ever, and 0% awful, it's brilliant. And then the different beliefs that you have of what you think might happen, you place on this scale. The idea being that it gives you some perspective as to how awful something actually is. But in the with climbing, because it there is a degree of risk. It's not a nothing's going to happen. It's not a okay. There's absolutely no danger whatsoever. It's really about probability and impact because those things are always interrelating. So we use a matrix of probability and impact. And I ask the climbers to put the things that you think these awful things um, about that may happen if you fall. You're going to place on this grid according to how bad the consequence would be. The worst possible thing being I'm going to die, to how likely you think that it's going to happen. And doing it in a group workshop as well was really revealing because most people found that all of the post-it notes ended up down in the fairly either it's quite high impact, but it's incredibly unlikely to happen, or it's quite likely to happen, but it has a really low impact. I don't think anybody had anything that was it's quite a high impact and it's very likely to happen.
Yeah, that seems right. Yeah.
So again, it was a tool to put things into perspective and to discuss around that. So I think I would look at this belief that you hold about it being inherently dangerous in terms of this grid and trying to look at the perspective of it. And again, this is where I perhaps like to be a bit more hands on. I would want to go with you to this place and to this example and go through what the various consequences might be so that you're talking and you're already sort of talking through it anyway, aren't you, in terms of it's there could be a hard catch, but it's overhanging, so I'm not actually going to hit anything,
Mhm.
and going through all the potential eventualities, but in terms of what would be the impact and what would be the likelihood.
Yeah. And we don't have to get into this, but I think that this comes up for a lot of people too, is while you're talking about this and I'm thinking about it, like the danger factor of it is one thing, but it's also just that I don't like the sensation of falling. And so I'm more dreading the
Mm,
sensation of a long, big fall because I just scream my face off. Like it's so uncomfortable for me. And so it's more just that, the fear of falling. Um, and so that would be a whole other
okay,
set of
fantastic.
beliefs, I'm assuming.
Yes, yeah, it would. And this is why it's so interesting going through an example, because this tends to be what happens. Like, as you're talking about it, you start to realize there's more layers to it, and it's not as simple as just, and this is what we found in research as well. For most of them, it wasn't really about the danger. It wasn't really about whether they thought they were going to hurt themselves. Most of them just didn't actually think that was going to happen. And when they started, I think one of the analogies someone used was it's like peeling away an onion. It was really a lot of other things. But it sounds like what you're talking about in terms of the sensation of falling, being uncomfortable, it actually links more to the irrational, unhelpful belief of frustration intolerance.
Yeah. How is it frustration intolerance? Can you explain that?
Yes, yeah. So it's this it's this concept that
Yeah.
you can't bear it. Like it's not a nice experience. It is a negative experience for you. It's not pleasant, and that's not going to change. But you can have that experience. You can be in that experience and feel that experience, and still exist, still be able to continue, and
I
still be a
love
person.
this actually. That's exactly what I need. Is because I typically live my life avoiding discomfort, and I think most of us do, unless we're like ultra runners or something. But um, if I can just say to myself, like, yes, I don't want to experience that, but I can tolerate it and I will, and it's worth it for me to tolerate it.
Yes. That's nice. That's really nice. And this is where often, so you do the work, and again, we have
Yeah.
to sort of skip ahead. But like you do the work of disputing, of peeling away these beliefs, and it is difficult, and it does. There's probably more as well. So you really pick them apart until you get to the things that actually, and you generally, when I work with people, they know when they've hit something important. They tend to have this moment of like, oh yeah, that's it. That's like that really is me. And then you have to challenge it, but then there are lots of tools that we can then use. And I like what you're saying is you're reframing it. You're coming up with self-talk and things that you can say to yourself to bring up the rational beliefs and the more helpful beliefs instead of the irrational ones. And it's likely that it's they'll still be there. It's not like we can delete these rational beliefs and they can just, pick them out of our heads and no longer have them anymore. It's just that we can try and weaken them and soften them and strengthen other beliefs instead by reminding ourselves and constantly doing the work and having this conversation about, no, it is unpleasant. I do hate this, but I can cope. I can bear this and I
Mhm.
can do this.
Yeah, and one other thing is you said these tools and this is one that's self-talk and I can say these things to myself. And then I just imagined like my husband saying this to me when I've taken and I'm like I'm scared and what he can say to me is I know you don't like the sensation of falling, but you can tolerate it. Like you are strong and you can deal with that. It's okay and I have you. Like that would be the most comforting
Yeah,
thing that somebody could say to me.
that's so nice. Like that's such a nice realization to have. And you can so put it in place. Like I'm sure. Like, do you feel like you could say this to your husband and ask him if he can say that to
Yeah,
you when
for
you're
sure.
climbing
And I'm
together?
sure the people at the crowd would be like, "What are they talking about? Why?" But yeah, he would definitely do it.
Yeah, but they'll, I mean, most likely, I'd hope they'll overhear it, and some of them, maybe not all of them, might be like, "Yeah, I feel like I need someone to say that to me too."
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what would happen. Yeah, that's cool. Thank you. It's great.
Oh, you're welcome.
And like you said, I'm sure there are other tools, and this would be a whole conversation or many conversations with people depending on their level of fear and adversity. So, um, yeah, are there other things that you wanted to point out about this type of therapy or anything?
I think that the only, and I think I've probably said it, but I'll say it again anyway, is that the way that I practice is that everybody is very unique. So even if, you know, a lot of us experience fear in their climbing, and I experience a lot of fear in my climbing, and the person next to me might also experience that fear too. But our beliefs are different, and they come from different places, and how we can dispute them, and how we can the rational beliefs that we can build up, it's different. It's not like one thing fits all, and we have these tools, and they're really just it's just perspective. It's just a way of seeing it, so that you can come up with the answers that are relevant for you. But what's right for you isn't necessarily going to be right for somebody else. And it really, yeah, I would just make that point that like we're all unique and we all bring our own, you could call it baggage if you like, but it's just bringing our own selves to everything that we do, and understanding yourself and what you need is like the most
Yeah.
important part of this.
Right, and I think that people really undervalue this type of work, and people, because I see it in my business, right? Like, people will pay thousands of dollars to work with a climbing coach who's gonna make them stronger, but they are averse to paying me like, I have some clients, but given the size of my audience, I should have a lot more, and I don't take that personally. I think that we just don't understand what this work is and the value of it. But like what you've just given to me, even in this very short time, that's invaluable, right? Like I'm going to take that with me and I'm going to use it and it's going to change the way that I climb. And this is why I'm having you on the podcast. Like I just think it's so valuable.
Oh, that's so that makes me so happy. It's such a lovely thing for you to say, and I really, yeah, that makes me really happy. And then I think you're right. I think it's just difficult for people to understand. It's not the most measurable thing. Like you can measure your finger strength, you can you can make gains, you can see it in a really objective way. And I think our beliefs, it's just messy. And that's why it's so important that we look at them, we understand them, but it also makes it difficult and it makes it really hard to kind of
Right.
show evidence for this and to kind of as a thing that we do. But it can be super helpful. And everyone that says that it has helped them and it's given them just like that little bit is that
Yeah,
makes me
that's
really
great.
happy.
And so how can people work with you?
They can. So I do. So I will do remote sessions as well. So I guess people can get in contact with me. Um, I don't know how to share my details, but you can find me online. So we're Labyrinth Climbing or Labyrinth Psychology. But then in the UK and Wales, I will do in-person
Cool.
sessions as well.
And are you on social?
Yes, we're on Instagram. I don't run our Instagram, but it's not very big. It's me and my partner's business. So my partner runs the Instagram, while as I do the
Nice.
sports psychology.
Well, you're doing great work. I really appreciate you explaining this and helping me. Thank you. And I wish you the best with your practice going forward.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed being on here and talking to you, and I love your podcast. I think it's fantastic. I think you have really good topics, and it's really interesting and really well spread out as well.
Oh,
So thank
thanks.
you.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Kat Lumby. You can again find her at labyrinthclimbing.co.uk, and she will do in-person sessions with you if you're in the UK, or she'll do online sessions with you for psychology. But I found this interview to be really educational. I love learning about sports psychology, and I have been using the tactic of, you know, thinking to myself, what am I willing to tolerate? And even if I'm scared, and it's really been working. And so, if this was helpful to you, I hope that you reach out to her. And if you want to work with me on your mindset, you're welcome to do that too. I am taking some new clients right now. And you can find my services where I will talk with you online on Zoom from anywhere in the world, and we'll talk about your fear of falling, your fear of failure, your comparison with others, and anything else related to climbing that you want to get through. However, I don't just work with people on climbing. A lot of times I'll work with people on their career issues, being frustrated with their job, not understanding how to manage their time with their family so that they can do everything that they want to do, all kinds of things. So I am a life coach certified, and I specialize in climbing, but I love working on other things. So you can find that at trainingbeta.com/mindset, and I'll either do 1 hour session with you, or you can buy a package of 4. So you can go to trainingbeta.com/mindset for that. And I will have another episode coming up for you in the next couple weeks. And so I'll talk to you then. Thanks for listening all the way to the end.